Right.
Get out.
Good evening. I would like to call the Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Counselor.
All right.
Remind me to talk to you on the way out.
I don't have anything under chairman's announcements other than to wish everybody a happy new year. Is there anybody here for anything that's not currently listed on our agenda? Seeing as none, I will go right into the public hearing continued from 12/6/22 for Sochia's oil flammable storage permit and possible votes. And yes.
Just so everybody knows, I filled out the Mullen paper for that meeting that I missed. I did watch it.
Oh, okay. Excellent. All right. We have anybody here to, I know we have Assistant Chief Manning is here. We don't have our contingent that we had on the last meeting regarding the public hearing on it. But I believe two items that we had requested on the previous one was the written letter from a professional engineer specifying what the actual gross capacity of each large outside storage tank is. Did we get that?
I have not received that yet. You want-
Yep. I believe you're from Sochia's, right?
I am.
He is.
He is. Come on up. Both of you guys can come up. How's that? Does that work?
I don't mind. Well, I got some information. for
Yeah,
Kev.
why don't you go up and just give them what you have, and then I can help answer any questions if they come up also.
Yeah, you can take a chair with you, Ted, you know.
Sure.
All the mics are hot. so-
Go on up so you can talk into the mic so that everyone can hear you.
Oh. I haven't done this since, I don't know when I did this last.
Got you right up at the big table now.
That thing, that
Is
thing,
it?
that thing's alive. Well, when Chief Kelly approached me about the tank farm, my tank farm been in existence since 2004, but my tanks have been there since 1948. I've been operating, I'm third generation operating there, okay? Back in 2004, the EPA was pushing for SPCT plans for contingency and counter spill measures. And even though they gave a deadline for anybody that didn't have containment to do something about it, well, I just decided that I was going to beat the bullet and have a complete tank farm renovations. I took my tanks, I picked them up, had them inspected, redid the containment like it was done by an engineer. Put it all back together in 04, 05. And then after it was all done, the EPA started giving everybody extensions for the next 10 years. So nobody else had to jump on the bandwagon, but I'm glad I did mine. But the whole thing come to light is after this was done and everything was complete, I was under the impression that the contractor that did the work for me took out the proper permit at the time. And I was always assuming it all got signed off and approved. So I've been running this facilities for 20 years without incident. But now I think the state fire marshal has decided that they'd like to have a permit from the fire department to be renewed every 5 years for, just for inspection purposes, So I got a hold of my engineer that did my engineering back in 2010. They did a SPC plan for me for the EPA, so I have it on record. Now, Web Engineering has agreed to come out and go over the facility again for me. But I couldn't just grab him at a short notice because they're committed to other projects. but I'm going to be meeting with him within the next 5 or 10 days to do an overview of the facility. I can enlighten you on some of the characteristics of my situation. These tanks were all considered 10,000-gallon tanks, okay? Will they hold 10,000 gallons? I don't know. I never fill them that full because my safety equipment, my high-level alarms and my gauges won't allow me to put that much in there. So, in a sense, 9,500 gallons is all I can put in one container. And even though there's 5 containers there, I never have more than 2.5 containers full at any one time. And then the next day it's all pumped out because it's delivered. It's just rolling in and out. So even though it's 50,000 gallons worth of tanks there, I've never had more than 30,000 gallons at any one time because it don't stay long enough. It's always moving. And now that we got more oil going in and out of there, it doesn't even stay that long. So, but as far as rating the tanks go, even with the decals that are up there that have been stamped on them, I can't say for sure what their capacity is because I've never filled them full. Because if you put safety alarms in a tank so it don't go up so high, you can't fill them full. So if they're all 9,500 and you got 4 of them at 9,500, that's the total amount that's in that containment if they were all full at one time, which they never are. And but as far as what the state fire marshal's looking for, as far as what their requirements are for the facility, it's all based on what they consider the tank size is. If it's under 10,000 gallons, there's a different criteria than if it's over 10,000 gallons. I don't know which it is and what criteria they're looking for, but the engineer is going to do what he has to do to satisfy them because he's been working with the state fire marshal on another project similar to mine. Not as easy as mine, but another situation. So I expect to hear from him within a week or two to get all this technical stuff out of the way so he can give me a piece of paper saying I'm in compliance with the fire department, the state fire marshal. That's where I'm at right now. I just couldn't get an engineer in there fast enough because they don't just come out on the drop of a hat. You know.
You have any questions or commentary on it, Chief?
Nope, he's doing what I asked him to do, which is to get that engineer out, and I didn't expect it to happen right away because of the holidays and that sort of thing. So this is just a chance to revisit it and see his progress. We have been making progress as we've been going along. He provided me with his spill control, his SPCC plan, and construction documents that outlines how he upgraded the tank farm in 2004. And he's come in and talked to me, so I think we're moving the ball down the field in the right direction. So he's doing what I asked. So basically, in order for me to endorse a license for you guys to approve at a meeting like this, I need to know exactly what the capacity of the tanks are, if they were full, even with the alarms going off, so how much they can actually hold, because we need to determine if it is over 10,000 gallons, because then it would fall under the state's AST program. And there's different parameters that the state checks in with the owner regarding inspection and licensing. But due to the total capacity of storage at that particular site, we still need to do a land license and then permit all the different items that he has on his premises, which are clearly outlined in the spill control document that he provided me. So I would say it'd be reasonable to get these items done in the next 90 days. Right now, I don't see an imminent hazard with the facility. Like he said, he's been operating incident-free for 20 years. There isn't any concerns from that point from us as the fire department, where in a situation, if we saw an imminent hazard, we'd issue a cease and desist. But I think that is not the correct way for things to go here. We're moving the ball in the right direction, and he's doing getting the information that I've asked for him to provide, so it's a good update. I don't know if you have any other questions for me about the permitting and licensing process. I'm happy to answer them because I understand that it can be a little bit confusing.
Chief, what about item number 2, the code analysis?
So that's going to be part of what his professional engineer is providing. So he'll provide us with how big the above-ground storage tanks are in gallons, and he's going to provide a code analysis to make sure that the facility met the fire code when it was installed in 2004 or upgraded, and where it might have some gaps in the fire code and life safety standards now. And if there are some gaps that are discovered, we can address them and figure out if something needs to be remediated. So those are the 2 items that we would need from his engineer, which he's getting for us.
Okay. So yeah, that was my question. You're trained to fight fires, not necessarily manage thousands of gallons of oil, and I think we rely heavily on this independent engineer firm to say everything's good. Great.
I can gladly say to everybody here that we had the first tanks there in 1946. The first 2 tanks that were there, and now we got 5. And I'm knocking on wood that we've never had an incident where the oil went down to the Mumford River or anywhere in between. Because right now, like I say, with the tank, I don't care how big they decide the tanks are. If I got to fill them up to 10,000 where it goes on the ground, I'm losing, that's a lot of money. You don't put oil on the ground. So I rather have them filled under their capacity for safety reasons. That's why I never go over 9,500, because it's a safety issue. You don't want to, just because your oil tank in your house is 275 gallons, but your vent alarm system in the top of that tank for the driver outside will only let you put in 250. He could keep going and put 275 in that, but then it'll come flying out the vent. But does that make it, that you get a 275, it only holds 250, but that still labels it a 275, but you can't put 275 in there. The vent alarm won't let you, and that's the way my tanks are set up with the alarm system.
Unfortunately, that's not how the permitting and licensing goes, though.
No,
We
it
have to
don't. I
permit-
understand that, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so, when the engineer, when he gets out there, we'll go over all these parameters, and I just want to bring everything out to light so Kelly can see that everything's up to snuff with the State Fire Marshal's office, and I can operate and go back to business without worrying about anything. I'll be happy with that.
Most people would.
So I have a couple different questions, but the first one is actually for Rich, where this is a pre-existing non-conforming use there. Are we able to license that at this point? Has it been licensed in the past?
No.
Answer, yes. You're dealing with a license under Chapter 148, Section 13, I think, which is the sole jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. Any zoning considerations, if there are any, would be separate. There's an old 1944 state Supreme Court case, Lincoln versus Giles, that says that the Board of Selectmen is free to give what licenses it wants to give, and that has no impact on zoning. So if there is a zoning issue, that's a separate consideration for the building department to address, the Board of Appeals to handle. My guess, this is just my guess, so you can't hold me to my guesses, is that pre-existing non-conforming use, as long as the activity's been ongoing, there has been a 2-year interruption.
Right. Yeah, from a zoning perspective,
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
There wouldn't be any zoning issue.
Yeah, and the only reason I asked that question first is so we don't go too deep into this if we weren't allowed to do that. So you cleared that up. So, and you already answered another question. You just said there was 4 tanks. In here it says 5 tanks.
There is 5. There is 5.
Then you corrected and said it's
Yeah.
5 on the last one. So
Right.
I got rid of that question. You did say that you have a lot more business going in.
I happen to,
Use oil transfer back and forth.
right.
So is the nature of the business changing, or is it just more?
I took and merged with another company,
Yeah.
and we operate 4 different companies out of there now. They're all under one umbrella, but they come in every day and they take out 9,000 gallons every day, 5 days a week. So the delivery, they fill the tanks, they drain them tanks, they just go back and forth like a yo-yo every day. And it never gets to sit in one spot because it just goes.
So what's that, like 30 trucks a day?
No, it's the same 3 trucks. It's the same 3 vehicles. They're parked in,
30 trips a day?
I would say they go out in the morning and they come back, and maybe one of them will fill up again and go out again, but the other 2 will probably be put away, depending on how many customers they have to deliver to. It's a customer-run thing, you know?
The only reason I'm asking this study is because it's a congested little street,
I know, with the,
and just hear me out for a second.
okay,
We go through the process and we issue a license. We need to consider what the impact is going to be to the neighborhood, because like any other business, we have restrictions on hours and things like that.
Right.
And if we don't discuss that at this point,
Yeah.
somebody sitting next to us, phone will blow
I
up
agree.
during the day if the traffic gets out of control. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
well, none of the operational delivery trucks work at night. It's all during the day. So we don't have anybody disturbing anybody anytime after 5 o'clock, they're put away. They don't go out till 6 in the morning. By that time, and when they leave, you can't even hear them go up the street, because I already explained to them that we got to be nice to our neighbors. And these companies that I'm working with, they're going exactly by what I tell them to do, because I own the facility, they're just leasing the operation. And we're on the right page, so you won't get anybody complaining on my street that they're being overly, like...
No, it's just excessive traffic.
But it's really, it's not much more than what I had when I ran it myself, you know? Because I ran 2 trucks every day, and now we're running 3. And by the time they get out, by 6:30 in the morning, they don't come back till 3 in the afternoon, you know? So then the place is just empty. So it isn't like, not quite that like that.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Field 16 Cook Street. Yep, so when council brought up zoning, that kind of triggered some things. And then when you brought up the traffic, there is more traffic than it used to be. When it was just Socia's Oil and Gas, it was like a small mom and pop operation. But now since he's taken on Jamie Hair, Jamie Oil, Morissette, Howie's Oil, Martin's Oil, and I'm not sure if there are any more, but in December alone, there were 16 oil tankers going down the street, which means they have to go back. So there's like 32 trips in 1 month that I was made aware of. It's like Kevin said, it's a narrow street.
I can't believe there was that many.
Let us speak, please.
Especially at the top, it's very narrow, and those tankers have to take a turn. And I realize there are signs up that say no parking, but people do park there. But aside from that, there are a lot of walkers, there are baby carriages, there are joggers, there are kids that just walk down the street. And like I said, it used to be a nice mom and pop operation, but it seems to be growing. And I'm wondering how much more will it be able to grow? How many more companies will merge or be bought out by Jamie Air, and then this becomes an oil depot or an oil facility for who knows how many oil companies? So that's...
Can I address that now?
You have to go through the chairman.
Yes, you
All
can.
right. Jamie Oil has bought out, I think, over the last 10 years, about 17 companies, okay? Now, the way he structures his business, the companies that are local, like I'm local, Jim Morissette, he was in Northbridge, and then there was one in Uxbridge. Now, he bought Cam's Oil over there, and they never come this way because they're out that end of the country. And so the trucks that I have in there have names on them, but then the names of the company that they used to be, because Jamie Oil does not buy a company and put Jamie Oil on the truck. He wants the other company to have their name so their customers will know that's my oil company. It's, you know, they don't want to see a strange truck coming in their yard.
It makes sense.
So that's why all the names on the trucks are from companies that they took over, but they leave the name the same. Now, I only have 3 different companies coming out of my facility. Now, Jamie Oil and Morissette, myself, and maybe one oddball that comes in once in a while. I think it's the one that used to be in Millbury there, Ken's Oil Service. He's got one truck that comes in, my truck and a couple of Morissette trucks, and that's about it. You very rarely get a Jamie Oil truck here. Now, as far as the transports go, I would say during the day now, we get maybe 2 coming in to fill the facility. They try to come in early in the morning. Sometimes they'll come in mid-afternoon, but they very rarely come in at night. They'd rather come in early in the morning when it's quiet and there's no traffic on the road and stuff like that. There is more traffic, and I understand that, but I talked to the owner, I talked to all the guys that operate with me, and they know that the people that live around this facility are depending on us to be diligent and careful with everything we do. And we're trying our best not to offend any person on the street with anything from our operation. And if we have to adjust different cycles of delivery between the trucks and everything, I'm pretty sure I can get a hold of the owner of Jamie Oil. We can sit down and discuss how we can improve the traffic pattern a little bit if we have to. That's not carved in granite, you know? I mean, there's always room for improvement here. But, I mean, we've always had trucks in and out of there over the years. The only thing we ever have a problem with is the people at the top of Cook Street. In the wintertime, when they plow the snow and it's heavy, the snow is piled up on both sides of the road, and people like to park out on the road. And they practically, even the fire truck couldn't get through in an emergency. And that doesn't seem to be fair for the homeowner to park out in the middle of the street, because the police and the fire service can't get in there, so I'll know not one of my transports will come up there and try to turn that corner on Terry and Silk, because once he sees something there and he stops, he's not going to get traction again. He's got to back all the way down the hill now. So I haven't, outside of what she's mentioned about the traffic, that's the first time I've had anybody on the street say anything to me about that. And I'm glad she said something, because I will look into it, but it's the first I heard of it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
a quick inquiry of council through you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I should start off with a question. When was the last time you added to a building on this footprint? So either built a new structure or added to the tanks?
Oh, you mean a building? I haven't built, on 13 Cook Street, we haven't built nothing. No building.
Since, well, you built the tanks up, so.
No, the tanks were there. I just picked them up and put a containment underneath them. The tanks were always there. They were on the ground. I just put containment under them.
So you've always had 5 tanks?
Always had
So
fun.
there's no building code inquiry, because that would expire after 10 years. But because it's pre-existing non-conforming, you need to be mindful that if you seek a building permit to add more,
Oh, no.
anything extra.
No, that's,
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying if you do,
It's not
you're
going
going to trigger the zoning inquiry into whether you're expanding a pre-existing non-conforming. Now, to that question, here's my question for council. Does additional traffic or additional trade on a lot constitute the expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use?
It could. You know, there's no black letter law that says this amount of traffic's okay, this amount of traffic is an expansion. I can't draw, you know, a red line and say there's the line, once you cross it, you're done. But the general standard is, are you increasing the intensity of the use? That intensity could be measured in different ways. It could be measured in the amount of gallonage, the size of the tanks, the size of the structures. Certainly one way it could be measured would be the amount of activity on the site. Those are questions that the building department would have to take up and analyze, perhaps even the Board of Appeals if there was a subsequent appeal. But not to dismiss the significance of those issues, because it wouldn't do that. The license application that you're considering right now is a separate consideration under Chapter 148, which goes mostly towards questions of safety of the tanks. Is there proper containment? Are there going to be fire hazards? It's under the I believe the statute, the section is called the Inflammable Substances Act. So that's the primary thrust. So no matter how you decide on this, for or against, that's your call. The question of zoning isn't settled by your decision. If there's a zoning issue, that can be taken up by the appropriate board or person in jurisdiction.
So, Mr. Chairman, a clarifying question then. So because this is such a specific statute, the licensing authority does not have the ability to set any triggers in terms of traffic flow and attach it to the license?
I won't say that. Your purpose, your licensing purpose here is one of public safety. So if the triggers that you set pertained to public safety, there was some evidence as to potential hazards created by, for example, in this case, traffic, more of a fire or explosion risk. Yeah, you could set triggers. That's what.
Hours of operation, all those things.
Yeah.
On other licenses.
Yeah, I mean, those are legit, but you need to tie it into the statutory purpose, which is public safety and more specifically the risk of flammability.
So my question, Rich, is based off of the previous conversation with the fire chief and the business owner. They still need to get their engineering firm out there to get a lot of these compliance questions answered, things like that. So we're figuring like 30, 60, 90 days or whatever it takes to compile all this data to get where our public safety chief feels comfortable and make sure we have all the information we need. What level of exposure does that leave to the town waiting for all of this information to come through?
Well, if we're talking about a situation where somebody's operating without a license, that's at their risk, not yours. It's like I decide to go out and drive home without a driver's license. You guys aren't in trouble just because I came to a meeting.
Okay.
By the way, I do have my license with me.
Mr. Chairman, I have
So
a couple-
Chief, if you're listening,
I have a couple other questions.
Go ahead, Matt.
So, Mr. Socia, I'm on page 8 of your spill control plan.
Right,
These are your telephone emergency contacts.
yeah.
Are these all still current phone numbers?
I got to review and make sure.
I would recommend that the licensing board require the licensee to annually review this and
Sure.
just send a piece of paper in so that we always have the most up-to-date information.
Okay?
I also
This
have
would be an
a,
annual license,
it's a 5-year, wouldn't it be,
5-year license.
Lisa? But he can still be asked to do things annually.
Well, I can make it known that if any numbers change, I'll just bring them up and let people know the numbers have changed, because,
Actually, as they change, you should
yeah,
be doing that, yeah, not once a year. Lastly, I'm on page 24, Mr. Chairman, and I'm looking at N1. So this is discussing the technology that connects your tanks to each other, the
Well,
interflow.
yeah, that's right.
Has the Douglas Fire Department been trained in any way or educated in any way on how to move those valves in case no one's available to do it? Or do you need to be,
Those valves are, that's all they are. And they're all off all the time. They're never on. We never use one tank at a time. They're manifold together because you gotta go from one tank to another. But we can't pull out of only one tank at a time, because you can't draw down 2 tanks, because it messes us up, because the guy comes back to fill the tank. If there's oil in it and he don't look at the gauge right away, he could overfill. One tank at a time, that's all it's open, and all the valves are always closed. That's why in that plan, they said something about electronic valve. I like old school. See, here's what happens with that. These guys have to come in, even the drivers that load their trucks. If the tank is empty, they have to shut the valve off and open the next tank. They also have to walk through the facility, and you know, one of the things they say on the is a visual inspection of your facility all the time. They're climbing in and out of that tank farm every day. I mean, around every tank, they're like swimming in there. So there's more on-the-job inspections every time they open up a tank. They're looking at all the other valves to make sure nothing's weeping. I can honestly say that after 20 years of operations, and not one drop of oil ever spilled out of one of those fittings. The guy that welded those tanks, he was a crackerjack of a guy. He was a hell of a welder to weld all that up, and not have one drip at all, ever.
That's impressive.
Very impressive. Impressed me.
so there's nothing in this plan that says your daily inspections and monthly inspections have to be done in writing and submitted anywhere.
Right.
But do you feel it would be reasonable to ask the business to do the monthly inspections and report them to the fire department? I mean, so we have a file that these 14 items are done once a month?
I could do that if we had to.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else have any questions?
No, I think we have to weigh in or weigh heavily the professionals
I think it,
to really know what potential issues there may be.
Chief Manning, oh, 1 second. You said you're looking at, like, you figured 90 days to get all this?
That was the recommendation.
I
by-
don't think it'll be that long. Hopefully it won't be that long. If Webb comes in within, when he said he's going to be in, I should be able to have all that in a month at the most. I don't want it to drag out 90 days. I wouldn't even want that myself. You know, at least we're going to try to get it a lot less than that.
Is it feasible to not have the tankers, the big transports on that road around school bus time or school walk time?
I don't think they are, because the first transport comes in, if he comes in, it's about 6 in the morning. I don't think they're picking up kids with a bus that early, I don't think. And once he comes in, he's there for 45 minutes, and then he backs out and he drives away. And for some reason, I don't know why, but all my other years ago when I had the other company from Upton, Jim hauling my oil, they'd always go up the hill and go back the way they came. For some reason, these guys like to back up. They like to go up off of Main Street and go back towards Uxbridge that way. That's the way they seem to like to go back. So they won't go back up the hill where all the houses are very tight. They'll go down by the bridge and go over that way. And whether they go right up Main Street and head right to Uxbridge or something. I don't know why they drive that way, but it's permissible because they're empty and the bridge is not rated for not being on it, so.
You talking Mechanic Street?
No, you don't use Mechanic Street because the Stone Arch Bridge ain't
Yeah.
rated for them trucks.
Right. So which,
Or you go the Cook Street Bridge.
Cook Street?
No
Come
problem.
out straight across from the post office.
Right.
Next to the goodness store.
Now, if there was some situation where I wouldn't have no problem, and I know that the owners wouldn't have no problem, if we could pin down what hourly frame during the day, it'd be all right for the transports to move in and do their thing and be out of the way when the kids come home from school. I don't think that's too hard to work out logistics for that. I don't see any problem with that at all. If that comes to play, like it's an important issue.
We have two ladies back there. I think that might be part of their concerns.
Oh, again, me. That's where I am. So one aspect is how big can your company grow?
It's not going to get any bigger.
Well, how do we know that Jamie Air isn't going to absorb all these other companies?
Because Jamie Oil has more business out towards the north and the west than they have my way. You see, what they did with my customers, you see, I have customers that I have to travel to Mendon, to Uxbridge, to Milford, and what they do is they took all the customer lists, they broke them up and put them in jurisdictions. Like if I had customers in Mendon, the Mendon company delivers those. I don't have to go there no more, see? And he did it with all the other customers, put them in localities so the drivers don't have to go too far to get to their route. And that's because, and what I have down here now is just a place for the trucks to load up and go off to wherever they're going and do the route that they got. But you're not going to see any extra vehicles more than what's there now because my garage can only hold 5, and that's all we got is 5 trucks in there. And they're out at 6 o'clock in the morning, 3 of them. I got 1 backup for emergencies. But like I said, they're there. The whole reason why Jamie Oil was so interested in my company was the fact that I had a facility where they could pick up oil and deliver without driving 50 miles to load up their vehicles in this area. And everybody was always after me to sell my place because they wanted my containment situation, my tank farm, because that was my biggest asset for a small company. And I'll have to let you know, we put in 5 tanks. And when I was running the business, I couldn't afford to fill 1.5, and that's about it. The rest of them stayed there empty all the time. Because who could come up with $40,000 to fill those tanks and let it sit there? So I ran 1.5 tanks for 10 years. You know, 1.5, that's all we used. The rest all sit there empty, you know?
You had another
Yeah,
question?
well, I have no doubt that Socia's Oil and Gas are doing a fantastic job when it comes to safety. I have no doubt about that. It's the other companies that I'm concerned about. And I am concerned about those tankers because, yes, they do come down Cook Street and they do go up Main Street.
Right.
And some days there are two tankers, some days 1, some days none. But like I said, in December, 16 that I know of came down the street.
16?
6,
Wow.
you know what?
That's something I didn't realize. Of course, I'm out doing service, I don't see it that often.
I
So
do have
the-
dates, if anybody wanted to know those
So-
specific dates, but.
The proposal that he'd had to try and work with the folks in the neighborhood, of trying to say, all right, well, we'll schedule our tankers coming in to make sure that they're not non-intrusive of the kids getting on, getting off of the bus.
Right.
Right.
Would that help alleviate some of the concerns that you have?
I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, so far, no accidents have happened, but the longer we go, we're getting close to an accident of some kind. Taking that turn, listen, Mr. Socia, I don't begrudge you your oil company, I really don't, but, just
I
to
wouldn't,
have so many
I
of
would
these
not want
tankers.
anybody to have an accident.
No, I know
That's
that.
the last thing I'd want.
And nobody would plan it, but it could happen, but it may never happen. But the thing is, there are a lot of tankers going down that narrow part of the street and then going back up, and I guess that's all I got right now.
No, it's a fair and reasonable ask, and Mr. Soch is more than willing to try and work with you guys to work out a schedule, but he also has a business to run. And
Absolutely.
we certainly can't say, well, you can't bring any more tankers in because you're pretty much killing his business at that point. So it's a matter of trying to have residents on Cook Street try and work out a schedule that's amicable at best. And I've tried to come up and down Cook Street. That's a dangerous road just with residents and parking and how narrow the road is as it is. So,
Sarah Nason, 14 Cook Street. So I think, I support Socia's business. I get my oil from there. I think my concern is just the long-term future of Cook Street. I'm a new homeowner. This is my place of home. It could be for the next 5 years, 20 years. I could be gone next year. I don't know. What becomes the value maybe of my home in the neighborhood now with the increase in traffic, or maybe the integrity of the structure of the road now with the increase of all the tankers coming and going? So do we have to look at maybe the highway department or whoever can come and, rebuild the road at some point, or can we reroute the traffic to accommodate Socia's business? I mean, I don't want to take away from the business, but I want to think about the future of our street, and of course us as homeowners. What does that do to the integrity of our street and the value of our home with an increase of traffic? So I think I'm just thinking long-term future of the integrity of the street. I want his business to be successful, but I also don't want to compromise the value of my street and my home as well. So if there's the opportunity to allow him to successfully run his business, increase of traffic, but can we redo our road? Can we accommodate maybe rerouting the traffic down? I'm not familiar with the streets, but maybe down another road, come up B and come up Cook. I don't know. Is there, traffic lights we can put in to accommodate Main Street and Cook Street? I'm just trying to think fast forward of everything with an increase of traffic and business so he can fully operate.
oh, traffic light in Douglas, you're asking a lot. No, kidding.
It's like Christmas in Southtown, USA.
We're supposed to
But
get some portable ones.
that's my concern. I mean, we do recognize the increase of traffic. I mean, I have dogs, I don't have kids. I worry, will they run out and get hit by a truck? No, I don't worry about that, but, it's the integrity of the street and
No.
the neighborhood, so.
And it's a valid concern, and I mean, the integrity of the road itself, we did do a road survey, or I can't even remember.
Stantec.
Yeah, from Stantec.
There is a mechanism, Mr. Chairman. We have a public safety committee that works for the road commissioners, right? And if it becomes an issue for the neighborhood, that committee is the town administrator, the police chief, the fire chief, the highway superintendent would meet, and if we needed outside agencies to assist us in proving lines of sight, markings, traffic flow plans, those things can be done on an as-needed basis. So there is a mechanism to hear a neighborhood concern and try to do something with it without and having to engage the business owner anyway, to accommodate the business as it grows.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess it would make sense, there's really not much we can do on this until we have all the data and running from the engineering firms.
Right, but to what Matt was just talking about with the, if you don't mind, what he was just talking about with the traffic in the future and stuff, sort of what I was talking about at the very beginning, not not trying to restrict his business per se, but the dynamics of his business has changed. And he's bringing in all these other companies. And because of the way, the makeup of that particular street, at what point does it become too much? So it's just a consideration. Obviously, there's no need to vote on a license tonight because we're going to have to wait for his engineering report and all that stuff. Because if you gave him a license, the fire department's not going to sign off on it. So there's no urgency to do it tonight, but it's, all these thoughts should be just entertained anyways.
Absolutely. So does it make sense to do, I know you'd like to get it done in 30 days, and I think anywhere from 30 to 90 to base on it. Would it make sense to do a check-in in 30 days and see where we sit?
I'll keep Kelly informed.
Yeah, we'll communicate, and then when it seems like it's ready to go, I'll notify Lisa and we'll get it on the agenda. And if for some reason there's extenuating circumstances that would start to push it into that 90-day window, I'll certainly let you guys know.
Does that work for the rest of the board? Make sense?
I don't think you have much of a
With
choice.
with the communication between Soch's Oil and the fire department, could we include Lisa in it? So if there's anything of concern, then the town administrator would know about it quickly.
Yeah, it makes sense. I have no
Which
issue with
you're
that.
on top of anyway, right?
Yeah, if she gets it. If she wasn't part of that conversation, just to include her.
They've been pretty good with
Okay.
with
Yeah.
keeping me informed on
Yep.
stuff.
Hal, any thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I see a local small businessman that's operated without incident, which is a good test of what they're doing. And I think once the fire department has signed off, I think we should be up and ready to go. The business is expanding, well, that's a normal thing for business. And, you know, I don't think that should be an impediment. But I like the fact that Mr. Socha is willing to work with the local neighbors and try to do something about timing of the truck. So that's all a plus. So I'd be prepared to support it once we get the report back from the fire department.
All right.
Do we close the public hearing then, or? does
You
that
would
stay
continue, you would
open?
keep it open,
Does that
continue it.
Continue.
Yeah, we just do it.
I just have one more question. I was just wondering if any of the board members are customers of Mr. Socha or any of the other companies, and if that would influence your decision. And actually, I don't even want an answer. I'm just putting it out there that, you know, if anyone should recluse themselves, then, you know, maybe they should. Just put it out there.
I have no.
I didn't hear what she said, I'm
She
sorry.
was asking if any of us were a Socha's Oil
Do you have a
customer.
conflict of interest on this
No,
particular issue?
I'm not.
I would have to recuse myself. I am a Socha's Oil
But would-
customer. It wouldn't influence my decision one way or the other.
If that's the standard, if you buy a sub shop at Greg's, if Greg's coming for...
All you'd have to do is just file a disclosure.
Yeah.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this issue is addressed by Chapter 268A, Section 23, subsection B, subsection 3, which says
This is
that,
why he makes the big bucks.
which says, if I can summarize it, thou shalt not act in a way that looks fishy. However, you will not be deemed to be acting in a fishy manner if you disclose the facts that would otherwise lend a fishy appearance to the proceedings. So, and for elected officials, that is a disclosure that's required to be public in nature. So if any of you are customers of the oil company, if you chose to disclose that right now, that would constitute a disclosure for purposes of the conflict of interest law. So disclose away.
I'm a customer, happy customer.
I am as
I'm
well.
also a happy customer of the pizza parlors in town and Chinese restaurants.
Okay, we're not
Goes
talking about
out
that
with
tonight.
reviewing common victuals license. I hadn't done that in the past.
So there you go.
Just for the record, I am not a customer, although quite honestly, I'm sitting here thinking, why not, right?
I'm on gas, but I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, propane. I don't live there.
And just to put a bow on this, certainly your willingness to work with the neighborhood has probably been years in the making, and today you showed me nothing that would indicate that you're looking to be a hindrance to the community, to that particular area. We do have to work some things out, and I think we will, but I'm with Hal and understand that businesses do change a little bit, and we just have to keep everyone's concerns in mind when we operate.
Well, this is my town, I've been here all my life, so.
All right, so we'll just leave the public hearing open.
Need a motion for that? Make a motion to continue the public hearing for no more than 90 days.
Second.
Excellent. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, can I have a roll call vote?
Fitzpatrick, aye.
Bone and I.
Morris, aye.
Davis, aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you both for coming down. All right. So we're on the meal expense reimbursement policy second read.
Nothing's changed.
Mr. Chairman, nothing's changed.
Okay. We'll move right along then. Review of audit services. Hygiene. Would you like to join us?
I don't need to, but well.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I want to frame the conversation for you, if I might, because the audit's a touchy topic. And that was the point of my sending you the Division of Local Services description of audit committees and their purpose, as well as the article from, I forget which publication it is. I don't know if it's the MMA publication or an ICMA publication. But the article started on page 2 and was continued deeper into that publication. In fact, it was the Division of Local Services regular newsletter. So you have both the white paper and an article. It's 2009, so it's an old article. Do you know where your audit committee is? The town of Douglas does not have an audit committee. It would be a best practice to institute one. In my view, and it is only my view, doesn't have to be yours, but there are a couple of really important considerations here. One is the audit measures the performance of the management of the town against federal, state, local Board of Selectmen standards. Therefore, it is inappropriate for the management of the town to comment very much on this process at all. I don't believe I have the authority to pick an auditor who's going to audit my work as well as Jean's work and her departments. That is either for the select board to do or for an audit committee should you form one. Now, it's my view, further, my recommendation, that as we look towards trying to improve our bond rating, the existence or non-existence of an audit committee may be one of those governance issues that can give us extra points on a scorecard and help us demonstrate to the marketplace the financial integrity of the town. Now, what's triggering this conversation, and this is for the benefit of council because I don't know if he's seen it, but our auditor, Melanson, has merged with a much larger company, Markham. Markham is well-known. High-quality firm. But to me, the transfer or the change in ownership of the audit firm is, for all intents and purposes, a change in audit. It is a selection. It shouldn't be a fait accompli. It shouldn't be done just because they sent us a letter and said, we're here, we're real, we're bigger than the guys you used to have, because there is no guarantee at all that Markham would necessarily assign former Melanson staff that have a relationship with the town to continue with the audit relationship. We may get a completely different team, and there is no reason for us to think that we could tell them who to assign to us. So my concern here is I think there is an open door here to have a conversation about who is the next audit firm for the town of Douglas going to be, because it can no longer be Melanson. And that's a decision either for the select board to make or for the audit committee to make. Should you form one, or does town meeting have to form it? I don't think so. You could do it a bylaw, or you could do it
if you wanted to.
But that's what's in front of you right now. It's not a simple change in ownership, we're going to get the same people and do it. It's a much more complicated issue than that. And I'm not comfortable saying I know enough about how Markham would operate to give you A or nay about whether that's a letter we want to sign.
Is this an annual appointment?
No. So, best practices is you should have an auditor that's with you for at least 3 years. They've got to get to know how you operate, how Jean's specific system, the way she does things, and to have enough of a history of the audit relationship to know where the flags might be. We've had clean audits, so it hasn't been a major concern for us, but it's a relationship that changes every year because they test different things. It is also, and this is where I'm probably too much of a bright line, black or white kind of guy, but the best practice is you must revisit your audit relationship at least every 5 years. Because the duty of the auditor is not to get cozy with the local staff. The duty of the auditor is to audit the books on behalf of town meeting. So I don't know how long Melanson's been here. I think it's more than 5 years. So it's due and should be part of what the consideration is as this relationship is discussed going forward. With that, I've said my piece. That's why I put those materials in your packet. I hope they were brief and explanatory.
I agree with Matt on many of his comments. It is not up to us to choose the auditor. Melanson was chosen. They did have an audit committee. I will speak to the principals involved in the audit, and the people doing the audit has changed over the last 15 years. We've had different managing partners. We've had different team managers, so we have not had the same set of eyes looking at the audit. So, I feel a little comfortable. But again, they are auditing my books. I don't feel comfortable recommending an auditor to you, but we did have an audit committee at the time that we chose Melanson. The reason why you have this in front of you is because they did merge. I did speak with Scott McIntyre today, and he's the manager principal, and the FY22 audit, which we're almost in completion of, will be issued on Melanson paperwork. So the letterhead will be Melanson. They will be doing the single audit as well as the FY22 audit. The only thing is, there's no good time to do these things, but, we're halfway through the fiscal year again. So we're looking, these are times where, we've done the Schedule A, we've done the recap, we've had the town meeting, we're getting ready for another town meeting. It's normal practice for me to start sending things to somebody because they may start their field work in June, to get ready for July. So time is, of the essence a little bit. If you have a little window, you definitely don't want to get behind a lot of people when it comes to audits, because part of what we do is we keep our information timely. It doesn't serve a purpose if I'm auditing FY22 and FY24. First of all, I can't remember things that long. Stuff working in 3 fiscal years, but you do want things to be timely and, kind of keep on a schedule. Like, this is a time where the audit would be coming in for FY22. We want them to come in at this time because we're starting, we're doing our continuing disclosure in February. So everything has a cycle. So the only thing I ask is that if, it's something you do choose to do, that you kind of look at it in the next month or so, because it does take time to do that.
So the audit committee that was there when we decided to move forward with Melanson. Do you remember who, like, what it was comprised of membership-wise?
Remember Todd Barry? Yeah. So Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, I believe Mike Gazinski was also on the committee. Mitch was probably on it, but, it was a number of years, ago. I think I was there, but more of a, just because it, yeah. Definitely not a decision. Again, they're auditing my books. I don't want to tell you who to use. I don't get cozy with the audit firm. I feel they have my back, so I want them to look at it, with some kind of suspect, because I want them to find what I would miss. It doesn't do any good to have them rubber stamp whatever I do. That doesn't help anybody, certainly not me. So.
Is there any issue with the selectmen being the audit committee where they're indirectly associated with the budget? No. So my initial thought is, if you create a committee, they're not going to have any direction. And because of the complexity of how the town operates, it could be very confusing very fast. It may make sense to initially at least have the Board of Selectmen do it. Create a process in which you could create the committee, appoint a committee or create a committee, whatever it is, to move into that. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but to give somebody a charge and not have any direction given to them, it may be very complicated at the beginning. And as Gene said, time is of the essence, so.
It's a concern. It's not, definitely a concern, only because, again, we're in December, and you want to make sure that you hire them prior to the start of the next fiscal year. It does help to have, Todd Barry was a CPA. He was, I forget the audit firm he worked with. It does help to have somebody in the field. I think sometimes having a member of the Finance Committee that may have some kind of experience related to that may be helpful to the board to have on the committee.
It was just my initial thought of thinking through it, so. If we could get volunteers, I guess that would be the big question.
Or at least a FinCom board.
Combo. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So you would want, or we would want, for the fiscal year '23 audit to be done by whoever is chosen by this committee?
Well, I believe Matt signed a 1-year, so that is for FY22. So a decision will have to be made for FY23.
Right.
And we will, because of the amount of federal funds, we will be responsible for the single audit as well as the main audit. And Melanson also does the end-of-year report as well as the student activity at least every 3 years, at a minimum of every 3 years.
I think it makes sense to at least try and get a committee put together. If that's like long-term best practice, may help us with a bond rating later. And setting them up with a direction or things like that, doesn't seem like it's going to be that hard to do, to say, this is what you're looking to do. This is the charge of a audit committee.
If you're asking my opinion, Mr. Chairman, I would respond by saying I agree with the vice chair that having the select board drive the bus here is going to keep it on schedule and keep it from being farmed out to people who need to be brought up to speed. I do think your finance committee has a lot of depth on it. So I think you could tap a couple members there to form an audit committee, but still have the quorum largely be made up of select board members, if that's how you wanted to do it. But time is of the essence, so it would really have to be dealt with very quickly. Now, there's money in the budget for the audit, correct? So we only need to have the money in the budget for the year that we're in.
The money in FY23 is for the 22 audit.
Okay. But in terms of being able to advertise it, we're not constrained.
It would have to be under the board's budget.
Right. Now, we're not compelled to compete this under 30B, So you could just pick a firm, but you might want to follow the RFQ process and put it out there and see if you can get 4 or 5 interested firms. That becomes an interesting conversation. I did this in Rhode Island with my former community, and picking an auditor is a big deal, and the presentation is usually pretty heady, but it's also usually pretty informative to see who's out there. And obviously, if Markham wants to compete it, they'd be perfectly welcome to. It's not about having to pick someone else. It's about making sure you pick someone. You have a conscious process of picking someone on a regular basis. So, I mean, if there's no budget constraint, I typically don't do this, but I would grab somebody else's RFQ for audit services, read it, share it with Rich, vet it out, but if it's good enough, we would just post it, like, quickly, and give people 3 weeks to respond, and this could be a...
MFM website, they're going to be all over like flies.
Exactly. And this could be on your February agenda.
I do want the board to be assured that it wasn't the same group that did the last 15 years of audits. We have had different managers, different teams coming into the town. So I don't want them to say, oh, you know, they come in every year and they just look at Gene's books and, you know, everything's fine. You know, even, you know, Frank Byron used to run the audit, and now Scott McIntyre, completely different teams. So.
Trust you, Gene.
Well, trust but verify, right? So you do want someone looking at my work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but.
Last question on my part is there a time that's better for an accounting firm to try and get new business? Are they swamped right now? Are they,
I think like all genres and, you know, everybody is tight on manpower. So I don't know if there's better time for anything anymore. I do know that, you know, we're probably on the earlier side with the audits. The single lots are due in March. You know, I think there's no downtime for anybody anymore.
so the 22 audit is Markham,
The 22 audit is Melanson.
Melanson.
So they'll finish, but they are merging as of one.
But your processes are the same for this year.
Yes, I mean, I would start sending information up probably, well, if we would continue with Melanson, I'd upload it to the portals now for some of the things that I've completed. But at the early, you know, I'd be looking at April, May, because, you know, like I said, the recap's done, some of those stuff, and they, if they're slow in May and June, they may start looking at some of our, you know, our schedules and, you know, they'll do field testing in June, you know, just to kind of get ahead of things when they're a little slower. It's not unusual for Melanson to look at the debt schedule at the beginning of June, you know, because all our debt's paid by June 15th, you know, so I would be able to close that down.
Yeah, I got you.
I would be able to send them 9 to 10 months of, or 11 months of, you know, expenditure testing, and, you know, so they may start doing their selections. So they would start June, begin, you know, July to come do some field testing.
So would it make sense to task Matt with throwing together the necessary requirements for an RFQ and get it advertised out?
Concurrent to that, we'll find some volunteers.
The Finance Committee is meeting next week, if someone wanted to reach out to them and see if anybody's even interested, if that's how you choose to, you know, go.
I think, Mr. Chairman, we should go back, I'm looking at Lisa, and maybe we'll have to reach out to Suzanne, but to find out if the Select Board had a charge or some other mechanism that they used, because it might still be a policy of the board and it's already in existence as to who's going to be on it. And we can explore that over the next couple of days and update the board.
I bet there might be.
Let's go there first.
Probably is, right?
Is there any motion or anything needed from us this evening, or is this more informational?
based on what I just said, I don't think we should launch an RFQ until all the information's gathered and the board knows what it's voting on, so
just
we should put it on the next agenda.
Okay.
In the meantime, we can reach out to the finance committee see if they
Yeah.
have any interest.
Works for me.
And no offense to Mike, but the town administrator should not be on the audit committee, and definitely not the town
Well, I
of
heard what
Douglas.
you said at the
Where all
beginning.
board members have to be town residents, so, yeah, no, that would never fly.
Sorry, Mitch.
I don't recall if it was, he was on the committee or if he was just. at
You
the
can be a
meeting.
resource
Yeah.
on the RFQ,
Officio.
and, but, yeah, not
Find one of
voting,
those
not a
old maps
quorum.
that Mitch had buried back there. I bet the data's on that.
I remember Pam Holmes and Todd Barry. I think. Maybe Shirley.
Yeah,
It was a couple years
it
ago.
was a few years ago.
Couple, yeah.
I was just trying to see if I had anything back then.
It was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
All right. So we will move on to the ARPA discussion and possible votes.
I bet you it's more than a couple years ago.
I was kidding.
Yeah,
15, I think you're,
yeah.
I
right?
was really
Predated.
kidding.
If you were just new here and you've been here
Yeah, I did-
15, 16
think
years
so.
now?
I'm on my, oh my God, 2005, December 5th,
So
2005.
17.
Troops are just finishing their 16-0 run.
Tim Harrison was the auditor when I first came, so it probably 15, because Tim Harrison was here a couple years.
And that's probably good in the sense of competitive marketplace being what it is. Maybe we can hone in on a better price, perhaps.
Can we get the prices from 15 years ago? That'd be nice.
Well, you also
I
get
don't know
what
that
you
you're going to
pay
be
for.
saving money on this.
All right, so we have the ARPA discussion, and we have economic development request ARPA funds to be used for the Mass Works, and expression of interest application for the North Street Infrastructure Upgrade Project, and review scope from Stantec.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Economic Development Project Facilitator Bob Manerick is not here tonight to talk to this any further. I know that he did introduce the topic. I know he did not say his name
He
3 times.
could be in at any moment. That's why I was looking at the clock.
You hit it at 3, he's coming.
He's at a basketball game tonight.
However, I'm going to speak my piece on this. I don't like the way this is developing. I don't want to charge headlong into this concept and obligate ARPA funds, which can be obligated tomorrow on a vote of this board, without really thinking this through. To be blunt, or direct, or upfront, however you want to say it, my vision for any project that would involve a significant reconstruction of North Street starts with community engagement and cannot proceed until there's some form of consensus. It doesn't have to be unanimity, but there should be consensus of the residents of the town on North Street that they can tolerate this, first and foremost, along with the rest of the town, because the opportunity that's knocking at the door is to have a very significant economic development project at Pine Sand and Gravel that will necessitate public utility infrastructure improvements on North Street. If we are going to do that, we should realign the street, make it safer, address other utility issues underground so we're not tearing the road up more than once. And some of this discussion will involve, well, exactly where are you going to straighten the road? Are you going to take any of my property? Are you going to stay within your right-of-way? But people may have encroached upon the town's right-of-way, think that they own something that they don't. When the engineer's flags start going out there, all the questions will start. So rather than be reactive to that type of conversation, I'd rather be proactive. And we need to reach out to the neighborhood and start having neighborhood meetings. The EDC may have to start meeting again, in my opinion. It needs to be populated with people who can go and form a quorum and have a conversation. Because This would be a major project. We have many, many residents that live on North Street or roads that connect to North Street, and we don't want to spring this on them in this fashion. So while I realize that the engineers are hot to trot and need the money yesterday, you know, the improvement would be done for the benefit of a significant private developer. That's going to have a huge impact on people's tax rates and the quality of life in the community. It's a valid conversation to perhaps consider, and my recommendation would be we should open this conversation about doing a TIF. Because the town, with the existing warehouse construction and some of the existing improvements in town, will have already created a revenue engine sufficient for its ongoing growth. And there will be so much value created by a major project of pine, sand, and gravel that there would still be more than enough excess to give them a tax incremental financing agreement where they pay for the bond. So instead of paying taxes, we go out, I'm looking at Rich now, for the way the mechanics of this work, the town issues a TIF bond, right? And basically, in lieu of taxes, the entity would pay the bond. Or the entity, or do we have to designate a TIF?
I'll have to think about that one.
Hal may know the answer to.
There's a restriction, that essentially is a sinking fund, and I think there are some restrictions on.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah.
But
All right, but there are different ways to skin the cat.
I'm much more comfortable with that than a cash outlay for engineering, which would take up a huge portion of your ARPA funds, and then what? Then we've got to try to finance this thing. So we would either have to cobble together some form of grants, donations from the private contractor, and even then the project would be too big, so we might have to go out to bond because we don't have X millions of dollars to do this. I would rather tie it up into a package, into a bow, call it economic development, build community consensus around support for it, or lack thereof. We'll find out when we start asking people the specifics and showing them the specifics, and financing it that way rather than this basically one-time revenue godsend that we got from the federal government for a project that's going to generate revenue that could more than finance this on its own. I would rather have the project finance itself than use this one-time funds for that. But that's just me on my soapbox. But I think there's a point at which there is a limit to how much we can do with grants and how much of our future we want to tie to a competitive grant process that we might not win. So while we've been very lucky, not lucky, but we've done great work to this point, thanks to Bob and others who have helped us along the way, but there is no guarantee that the next time we apply for the money that we'll get it. And we don't want the whole project to rely upon that. Now, I don't think, this would be another question. Let's say we did decide to do a TIF with a bond structure behind it. Then if we won a grant, I don't really think the grant proceeds could be used to retire any of the TIF.
No, probably not, but, so you'd have the TIF as a standalone document. You'd have a revenue stream coming in from that. The thing that distinguishes a sinking fund, an illegal sinking fund from, and I'm sorry if I'm straying into bond counsel, distinguishes an illegal sinking fund from something under the normal Chapter 44 process would be the town meeting appropriation of funds to the purpose of retiring the bond. I think it's only when you draw a direct connection A to B, legal issues, whereas if you just loop town meeting into the process, make it A to B to C, then it's legit. There are ways to do it.
Having said that, we earmarked $100,000 at the last town meeting for this, and I think there was barely a whimper as to what it is we're doing. Are we leaving $529,300 on the table by not supporting the requested amount?
I guess if you wanted to make both things work, you could say, there's a funding mechanism in place for the engineering only. But on a go-forward basis, that engineering is going to a specific end, which would be a project that we would support with a TIP, and not just leave it out there as, we'll fund it when we get there kind of conversation.
I kind of like where you were leaning to with that, though, is, you know, it is a sizable project, and it does have impact on the
What is he
neighborhood.
asking for?
I think getting some consensus from the public would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what Matt has said. However, I think what we're looking for is just to have this money set aside, at least temporarily, to see if that will help us qualify for a Mass Works grant. So if it's just reserved there while we apply, and I could be wrong, I don't know if it would necessarily be expended, but doesn't mean that we're committing to a major project just because we've set aside the funds. So I think we should go carefully if this is going to have a big impact in the area. But I just wondered if we could reserve the funds for the Mass Work potential application.
But declining the spend.
Well, what he's asking for is another $127,000 of ARPA, which is not that big of a nut. But just, it's part of a overall funding mechanism for $750,000 worth of engineering, which I don't think there's going to be any underage. I think you're going to use it all. Stantec does two things. They do very good work, and they are expensive. You get what you pay for. So I don't really see us not using all 750 to do this. But what I want to foreclose in this conversation, if I can make that recommendation, would be that we would look to ARPA funds for anything else. So construction plans or any other design effort beyond the site readiness grant scope.
Not ARPA eligible.
For anything else on this project? Or for everything? Townwide.
So for this project,
For this
so in other
project,
words,
okay.
I don't want the remaining 2 million to be seen as a potential funding source
Correct.
for the project once the design is done.
So it's 127,000, you're not coming back to the well.
No, but we need to make up that 120,000 in order to realize the 529 and to show the state that we're serious about site readiness.
You could encumber it now, you would spend the site readiness funds as the invoices come in. Then your next tranche would be the 100,000 from town meetings that's already improved. But this is your backstop that allows you to have a contractual relationship with Stantec for the total estimated cost, which was in your packet.
Which I agree with all that, because we don't, Matt's mentioned a TIF and all that stuff, but we're not even there yet. This is just to get us to the point where we have a design done so you can apply for the Mass Works grant. The reason for the increase, like I asked Bob at the last meeting, was the scope of work change, a dramatic change. They included a big water tank and some other things that got added to it. That's why it went up by 25%. So I was satisfied with the answers that he gave me last week, 2 weeks ago, as far as why that increased. The next step on this process, I don't think we're there yet, so I'm aware of it, but I'm not concerned about it at tonight's meeting. I would be inclined to support the 127,000, if that's what the number is, to make this budget whole so that Matt could properly advertise it for, or give it to Stantec, however that works.
No component of this is federal, so it doesn't require, the engineering doesn't require competition. But what I'm looking for is the guidance of the board to say we're not closed off to the idea of doing a TIF going forward as the way to finance this. Because that process will take a long time. So it would have to be negotiated with the developer. We'd have to go through council to figure out what's the proper way to put it on the town meeting warrant. And then there may be additional process beyond that. I don't know if there's a statewide approval or a DLS approval.
Yeah, good.
I'm pretty sure there is.
You have to send it to them, and they check to make sure you're not getting flood flags.
So we're not going to just do this. It's going to take a while. And I would rather get the boat moving in the right direction. Because the difference between this and other conversations we have in the past is that there is no speculation. CRG is already in a purchase and sales agreement with Pine Sand and Gravel. So they are truly going to develop that property. So the question is, in what way? And the more flexible we can be in trying to understand what we need to do to support that development will help us negotiate a better agreement with them. I was driving in tonight, noticing how fast Pine Sand and Gravel is coming down.
Yeah, they're taking down the front hill
There's a
today.
lot of material, and it's really going to be noticeable to people. You're going to be able to see all the way into the back. So it's a major change to the way the town's going to operate over the next 2 or 3 years.
I think you have to catch lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
I support the 127,000 for now, and if we don't end up spending it, then,
Great.
yeah.
I'm happy to have a vote tonight on that, because that would allow us to sign things.
Throw a motion out there for it.
Well, Hal might want to,
Hal, you want to make the motion on this?
Sure, I move that we reserve $127,000 of ARPA funding to be used for, potentially for Mass Works expression of interest application for North Street infrastructure upgrade.
just a quick point of order with that. The memo here says 120,700. Do we want to give them a
Oh,
one?
120,700.
I'll second.
Okay,
127.
so the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Patrick, aye.
Bone and I.
Morris, aye.
Davis, aye.
All right.
So just to finish Matt's conversation that he just had, he's looking for a consensus from us if we would entertain this TIF with the developer. Other than, I would just like to understand how the structure would work. Is tax-free for a number of years, a percentage, or how's that work? So,
Maybe what we can do, Mr. Chairman, to answer the Vice Chairman's question, is for your next meeting, make that a specific agenda item. We just talk generally about what's involved in a TIF and the process. By then, we'll have a chance to talk to Rich more and Hal more about the specifics, because I know Hal has done a fair number of TIFs.
I talk about it then, talk about it now. I'm good.
Well, Mr. Chair, I did one deal in the town of Westwood at the 128 station, and the developer needed a lot of infrastructure costs, so we calculated what that would be, and then had what's called a formulaic TIF to generate enough money to reimburse the town for its bonding expenses to do the infrastructure.
You did that Westwood thing, Hal?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was huge. That'd be a good one to look at.
Unfortunately, the developer I was doing with tore down all their buildings, and they hit the worst real estate crisis there. But TIF went through, because there was Cabot and Forbes over in that area, around 128.
Huge project.
it would be a good conversation to have, just so it's clear for everybody. That's all.
Yeah, I'd like to get a better understanding on it. So we'll put
There's
that,
several mechanisms we can use if the town wants to use some of its tax revenue that would be generated to support debt service. Fortunately, on our first project, we didn't have to do that, which is, so the town's going to get 100% of the revenues.
Any chance of that happening with this piece? The reason why I say that is we did the TIF for the classic envelope, and it was great to have tenants there, but it felt like we were kind of giving away the farm in order to do
Let the
that.
kids move back in the basement.
Yeah, there's a right way and a wrong way to do all of these things, right?
Yeah.
Part of it's going to, your sizing of the deal is going to depend on how much value you think they're going to create. The number of square feet they estimate they're going to build out, what their most likely assessed value is going to be, and you look at what their potential tax liability to the town. CRG specifically does not want to do TIFs because they don't want to be seen as that company that needs corporate welfare. They've always been very clear they don't want TIFs. However, the size of this project totally outstrips our enterprise fund at the water department. They could never support what's going to happen here, ever. So, and there won't be enough ratepayer increase to support this level of debt. So that we need a more creative solution. And even for the town, the conversation has to be, how much new debt do you want to issue? Because if you're thinking you're going to issue debt for the highway bond, and you're going to issue any form of debt for public infrastructure, even if it's tied to a huge revenue-generating project, it's still debt. And you are still capped on how much debt you can take. And below that cap, there's the amount of debt you can reasonably expect to be able to service over time. So these are all conversations. It's not posted for tonight, so I'd be more comfortable if it was on the agenda, and anybody interested in the topic could be prepared for it in 2 weeks.
Makes sense.
Okay.
All right. So we are skipping the approval of minutes. Right to your report, Mr. Administrator.
So I have 4 quick items, and I want to make them quick. My apologies to anyone I haven't gotten back to, or to anyone who has not benefited from the clearest of thought in my mind. I don't want to make this a personal conversation, but the fact is, I've been very sick for the past 4 or 5 weeks. And I've lost like 12 pounds in 3 weeks, and I've taken about $8,000 worth of medicine, and it looks like I'm finally turning the corner. But the amount of time I've been in the office firing on all 8 cylinders is just not what it usually is. So I'm catching up. I will be out tomorrow because I'm testifying in a trial. I may get here in the afternoon, but once that is done, because the trial is moving along very quickly, I will probably be done with that aspect of things. So I will catch up on things. I did want to mention, before I get into the rest of the more serious issues, we found out today, this morning, that the former governor of Rhode Island, Lincoln Ullman, passed away. And I often mention people that I know that have passed away, just as a respect to their memory. Lincoln Ullman was a big part of my life. He was a major leader in the Rhode Island landscape. When I lived there, he was the U.S. Federal District Attorney, rather famously engaged the Colombian drug cartel and handed them a number of really significant legal defeats, and then was subsequently elected governor for 8 years. And I was on his transition team and was involved with staffing his administration before I went back to school. But on a level of personal loyalty, Ullman was elected in November of 1994. My father passed away very suddenly in October. And Lincoln Ullman came to the wake and the funeral. And I think to have that kind of loyalty and respect for us grunts on the ground who are earning like 20 grand a year, trying to get voters to the polls for him and all the rest of the things, that was a class act. And every single time I saw Lincoln Ullman after that, I could always have a personal conversation. So he was 86 years old. He lived a good life. He had a great family. And I wish them the best as they grieve the loss of their father. On to town business. We're going to get very busy on Gilboa Street and Lackey Dam Road over the next couple of weeks. I personally am not satisfied with the conversation we've been having internally about the street work. To me, this is the most complicated part of the project. We had water on one side of the street and wastewater on the other side of the street, and we kind of pushed traffic pretty easily over to one gutter, over to the other, over to the shoulder. Some of the trench work in the last project wasn't ideal, wasn't as good as the water project, but it still has gotten done, and you can drive up and down the street now. There's a couple of small potholes have opened up, but it's not the end of the universe. Natural gas is going to start next week, and they are coming down the middle of the road. And that's a much more complicated traffic flow pattern when they're working. Because in some places, the road gets a little bit narrower than others. And in some places, really, from the middle of the mill building up to the 146 interchange, there are no streetlights. So I'm looking to build a plan internally that is going to address these issues, because we need a lot more lighting and a lot more signage and a lot more public notice than we've engaged in to this point. Because it's not just the gas coming down the middle of the street. CRG is going to be on one side of the street with a pile driver driving piles for the bridge that they're going to build over the Mumford. So they're going to close an entire lane of traffic on one side of Gilboa. So the middle will be shut, and one side will be shut for however distance that is. Everybody's working hard to accommodate each other. Looks like gas is going to start on one end of the road so they don't interfere with the pile driving activity, so they won't be in the same area at the same time. Obviously, they can't be. But all that means is that you're now, as you drive through that busy interchange, you're going to drive by the busy pile driving site, and you're going to drive through the natural gas construction site. I just think we're going to step up and do a little bit more public notice than we've done to this point. So that's the roadway, just, you know, by way of the public understanding. The natural gas process is a little bit different than the others because of the way the pipe is laid. You know, it's fused together, and they march along. That's very professional firm that has worked all over the Commonwealth in these kinds of projects. So the digging here is easy. They should be progressing along rather quickly. And they're at a higher level of construction, so we're expecting the trench to be closed every single night, compacted and paved, but weather permitting, right? The last thing I have here has to do with public safety radio. And I'm going to hand around, and Hal, I emailed this to you in case you're missing it. This is the project that keeps on giving because it seems to never end, but it is about to end, and I just wanted to bring everybody up to date at once. We will, for a short period of time, have the old radio system up and running, and the new radio system will be up and running at the same time. And we will transition the radio traffic over from the old system onto the new system beginning the week of the 9th of January. So you'll be handing out portables and pagers to each department. There'll be training for the department. There's one more VHF antenna to install and some site equipment. There's a couple of other activities here for the 9th and the 16th. But your actual complete switchover is going to be the first week of February. Now, just because that cutover is completed doesn't mean that the project is over, because when we negotiated this contract with Marcus, we specifically laid out a system testing regimen that we expected them to follow. We want them to test signal strength and clarity without leaves and with leaves, and make adjustments accordingly before we accept the final product. They're all apologies about how they've encountered different delays. Didn't necessarily communicate them that effectively to me, so I ended up not knowing, not being able to explain why it was taking so long. But we are finally getting to pay dirt, not a moment too soon, because the radios today, it was pure static. Maybe it's because of the moisture and the cold, but it's time to move this thing along. But everybody always asks about this project. So are there any questions you want me to ask Marcus, or that you think you can ask me?
Nope, that area of the reception, they're going to check down at Walmart.
Yes. Yeah. Walm Lake, Southwest Maine.
Up by the-
Oak
up by
Street.
the campus.
But, right, so up Oak Street.
Hill again.
Yeah. All the boundaries of the town where we've had issues. But that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that we skipped over, sorry to bring it up again, but Matt talked about an outreach meeting with North Street. Is that, how do you want to set that up? Is that something we need to talk about, or? Because we never did get an answer from us, that's why I brought it up.
Well, I think what I'd like to do, since we're going to talk about this some more next meeting,
Okay.
is a separate agenda item for a communication plan. So we'll lay out the entire
I
flow.
wanted to make sure you get that addressed, because you did bring it up and we
Yeah.
never did answer you.
All right. Are there any open session topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of this meeting?
No.
Seeing is none. I'll be looking for Mr. Bonin for one of his infamous motions.
We're doing all three, B, C, and D.
First of the year.
The first of the year. Hal, would you like the opportunity to do this? All right, with that, I will,
Punching weight.
I would make a motion that we move into executive session for the purposes of discussion of real property, discussion of building security with the Douglas Fire Department, to the interest in real property and potential litigation, and then to leave executive session for the sole purpose of adjournment. It will be enjoyment. I'm
Yeah.
sitting on the couch.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing is none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Patrick, aye.
Phone and I.
Morse, aye.